What would you do if your own family demanded 60% of your dead husband's life insurance money at his funeral? And what if a 9-year-old's math homework exposed the ugly truth about love, greed, and who really deserves to be called family? This is the story of Hannah Mark and the invoice that changed everything. Sometimes the best love stories start in the most broken places. Hannah Martinez was 33, sitting in a circle of folding chairs at the Springfield Veterans Center, sketching absent-mindedly in her notebook while a group of wounded soldiers shared their stories. She wasn't a veteran herself, but trauma has a way of finding its tribe. Her brother died in Afghanistan 3 years earlier, and these Tuesday night sessions were the only place where her grief felt understood. That's where she first saw Mark Blake. 6'2", sandy brown hair, hands that moved gently when he spoke about the nightmares that kept him awake. Mark was 35, a former Army medic turned school counselor who volunteered at the center every week. While others talked about their pain, Mark listened with the kind of attention that made people feel seen. Hannah noticed how he'd lean forward when someone was struggling with their words, how he'd nod slowly and say, "That makes perfect sense." She started coming early just to watch him set up chairs the way he'd straighten each one like it mattered. Their first real conversation happened over terrible coffee and paper cups. Hannah had sketched the memorial wall during group, and Mark asked if he could see it. Her drawing captured something words couldn't, the weight of names carved in stone. "You see people clearly," he said, and something in Hannah's chest that had been locked tight for years started to crack open. 6 months later, they were inseparable. Mark would text her at lunch from Roosevelt Elementary, where he counseled kids, sending pictures of motivational posters he'd drawn badly on purpose to make her laugh. Hannah designed his business cards for free, then his flyers, then his whole website, because she loved watching him help people rebuild their lives. The proposal came 2 years later, not with a fancy restaurant or a crowd, but in Hannah's tiny kitchen on a Tuesday morning. Mark was making pancakes, humming off key, when he suddenly turned around and said, "I want to do this every Tuesday for the rest of my life." He pulled a simple silver ring from his pocket, the kind that said, "I saved for months, but I picked it myself." Hannah said yes before he could even ask the question. But their happiest chapter almost never happened. Hannah miscarried at 12 weeks, right when they'd started telling people. The next year was medical appointments and hormone shots and disappointment that sat heavy between them. Mark would hold her after each negative test, whispering, "We'll figure it out. We'll find our way to her." Mark was convinced they were meant to have a daughter. Emma Blake Martinez arrived on a snowy February morning after their third round of IVF, screaming with healthy lungs and Mark's stubborn chin. The nurse placed her in Hannah's arms, and Mark immediately started crying. "There she is," he whispered. "There's our girl." Mark was the kind of father who made other dads look bad. He packed Emma's lunches in bento boxes shaped like animals, left encouraging notes in her backpack, and coached her recreational soccer team even though he'd never played the sport. Every night at 7:30, he'd create elaborate bedtime stories starring Princess Emma the Brave, complete with voice acting and sound effects. On Saturdays, they'd build blanket forts in the living room. On Sundays, Mark taught Emma to cook, letting her crack eggs and make a mess while he narrated like they were hosting a cooking show. And now, Chef Emma adds the secret ingredient: love, and maybe too much salt. Hannah would watch them from the doorway, her heart so full it almost hurt. This was the life she'd never thought she'd get to have. At Roosevelt Elementary, Mark had found his calling. Kids who wouldn't talk to other adults would open up to Mr. Blake. Parents requested him specifically. This year he'd taken special interest in Miguel Santos, a quiet fourth grader whose father had been deported the previous spring. Miguel reminded Mark of himself at that age, angry and scared and trying to be invisible. Every Tuesday after school, Mark would work with Miguel on reading, but mostly they'd just talk. "My dad left too," Mark told him one afternoon. "Different reasons, but it still hurt. You don't have to carry that anger alone." Hannah started noticing the headaches in October. Mark would press his palm to his forehead during dinner, close his eyes for just a moment too long. When she asked, he'd say, Just tired, Miguel's case is keeping me up. He'd been staying late filling out paperwork for Miguel's counseling referrals, calling social services, trying to get the boy's mother connected with legal aid. The fatigue was harder to ignore. Mark would fall asleep on the couch by 8, still in his work clothes. Emma would cover him with her favorite blanket and whisper, "Daddy works too hard." "He's helping a student who really needs him," Hannah would explain, but privately she worried. She'd suggest he see a doctor, and Mark would promise he would right after Miguel's custody hearing, right after the school fundraiser, right after next week. There was always a next week, until there wasn't. The last normal morning, Mark made Emma's lunch in the shape of a butterfly. He kissed Hannah goodbye and promised to be home early because it was Emma's art show at school. He texted her at lunch. "Miguel's mom got the legal help. Good day." Hannah texted back, "See you at 6. Emma's nervous about her presentation." Mark never read that message. The call came at 9:17 a.m. while Hannah was reviewing client mock-ups at her desk. Roosevelt Elementary's main office, a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Blake, this is Principal Morrison. There's been an incident." Mark collapsed during morning assembly. "The paramedics are taking him to Springfield General." Hannah's coffee mug shattered on the floor. She grabbed her keys, left her laptop open, and drove through red lights she didn't see. Her phone kept buzzing with texts she couldn't read. The only thought in her head was, "Get there, get there, get there." But traffic had other plans. A fender bender on Route 34. Construction on Maple Street. Every red light lasting forever. Hannah sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, watching the clock on her dashboard tick. Past 9:25, 9:30, 9:35. She ran through the emergency room doors at 9:41 a.m. The intake nurse looked up with that expression healthcare workers get when they have to deliver news that changes everything. "Mrs. Blake, Dr. Patterson is waiting for you." Dr. Patterson was young, probably Emma's age when she was grown with kind eyes that had seen too much. She led Hannah to a small room with tissue boxes and uncomfortable chairs. "I'm so sorry. Mark suffered a massive heart attack. By the time the paramedics arrived, he'd been down for several minutes. We tried everything, but the damage was too extensive." 8 minutes. That's how long Hannah had been stuck in traffic while Mark was dying. 8 minutes that felt like 8 years. 8 seconds. 8 lifetimes all at once. "He didn't suffer," Dr. Patterson said gently. "It was instantaneous. He wouldn't have felt any pain." Hannah nodded, because that's what you do when someone tells you something that's supposed to be comforting but feels like glass in your throat. She signed papers she didn't read, answered questions she didn't hear, and walked back to her car in a daze. The drive home was silent except for the sound of her phone buzzing. Messages from Mark's school, from neighbors, from friends who'd heard. She turned the phone face down and drove exactly the speed limit, checking every mirror using her turn signals. Everything had to be perfect now. Everything had to be controlled. Emma's school let out at 3:15. Hannah sat in the pickup line watching other parents scroll through their phones or chat with each other and wondered how the world was still moving when hers had stopped completely. Emma bounded to the car with her usual after-school energy backpack, bouncing, clutching a painted canvas. "Mom, look what I made in art class. It's for Daddy's office." Mrs. Chen said it's the best sunset she's ever seen a fourth grader paint. Hannah looked at her daughter's proud face at the painting of a purple and orange sky, with 2 stick figures holding hands, and felt something inside her chest crack in half. "Emma, honey, get in the car. We need to talk." They sat in Hannah's driveway for 20 minutes. Hannah had practiced what she'd say during the drive home, but every word evaporated when she looked at Emma's expectant face. How do you tell a 9-year-old that the person who reads her bedtime stories is never coming home? "Emma, something happened to Daddy today. He got very sick very suddenly at school, and the doctors tried to help him, but they couldn't." "Daddy died, sweetheart." Emma stared at her for a long moment, processing. Then she looked down at her painting at the 2 stick figures and let it slip from her hands onto the car floor. but he was going to help me practice my presentation tonight. I know, baby. And we were going to build a fort this weekend. I know. Emma's face crumpled then, and she let out a scream that Hannah felt in her bones. No, 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 you're lying. Daddy wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. Hannah reached for her daughter, but Emma pushed her away, crying so hard she could barely breathe. I want Daddy. I want my daddy. Oh. They sat in that driveway until the sun started to set, Hannah holding Emma while she sobbed, both of them, learning what it felt like when half your world disappears in a single moment. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep in Hannah's bed, clutching Mark's pillow, Hannah called her mother. She needed to hear her mom's voice, needed someone to tell her she wasn't alone in this impossible thing. Karen Martinez answered on the fourth ring. Hannah could hear music and laughter in the background, the clink of glasses. Hannah, what's wrong? You sound awful. Mom, Hannah's voice broke. Mark died. He had a heart attack at school this morning. He's gone. Silence. Then, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. That's terrible. Listen, we're at Rachel's engagement party right now. Everyone's here and I can't really talk. Can we discuss this tomorrow? I'll call you first thing. Hannah sat in her dark kitchen phone pressed to her ear, listening to party sounds through the receiver. Her mother had just told her she was too busy celebrating her other daughter's engagement to talk about her son-in-law's death. Mom, I don't know what to do. Emma doesn't understand, and I have to plan a funeral, and I don't even know where to start. I know, sweetie, but tonight isn't good. Rachel's been planning this party for months. We'll figure everything out tomorrow, okay? Get some sleep. The line went dead. Hannah stared at her phone screen, at the missed calls from friends, at the text message notification she hadn't opened. Then she saw a new Instagram post from her sister Rachel, posted 37 minutes ago. A group selfie with a champagne glass, everyone smiling, caption reading, "Best night ever, so blessed to celebrate love with my favorite people." 37 minutes ago, while Hannah was putting her grieving daughter to bed, while Mark's body was lying in a morgue, while Hannah's world was ending, her family was celebrating the best night ever. Hannah turned off her phone and sat alone in her kitchen until dawn, learning what it felt like to be truly abandoned. Planning a funeral when you can barely function is like trying to solve calculus while drowning. Hannah sat at her kitchen table, Thursday morning, surrounded by pamphlets from funeral homes. Her laptop open to flower arrangements. She couldn't afford her phone, buzzing with decisions that felt impossible: cremation or burial, open, casket or closed. What songs would Mark want? What would he wear? How do you summarize a man's entire life in a 30-minute service? That's when Isaiah Blake called, Mark's cousin from Denver, a voice Hannah had only heard at Christmas and birthday calls. Hannah, I just heard. I'm flying in tonight. Don't make any more decisions until I get there. Isaiah was Mark without the gentle edges. 6'4", broad shoulders, the kind of presence that made room service waiters stand straighter. He'd served 2 tours in Iraq as an army ranger before becoming a paramedic. When he walked into Hannah's kitchen Friday morning with coffee and bagels, it was the first time since Tuesday that Hannah felt like she could breathe. What do you need? He asked. Not, how are you holding up? He understood that grief was work and work required doing, not talking. They spent Friday at Peaceful Rest Funeral Home making decisions that felt surreal. Mark would be cremated. There would be a service Saturday at 2 p.m. at St. Matthew's Community Church, the place where he'd volunteered every Christmas serving meals. No fancy flowers, just donations to the scholarship fund he'd started for military kids. Hannah's mother finally called Friday evening. I'm so sorry about yesterday, honey. The party was already planned, and you know how Rachel gets. But we're all coming tomorrow. The whole family wants to support you. Support? Hannah almost laughed. Where was the support when she was sitting alone in her kitchen, Wednesday night, Googling how to tell your child their father is dead? Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that feels like the sky is crying for you. Hannah stood in front of her bathroom mirror, holding the black dress Mark had bought her last anniversary. She'd gained weight since then, stress eating and forgetting meals, and it didn't fit quite right. Nothing fit right anymore. Emma appeared in the doorway, wearing her navy blue dress from last year's Christmas concert. "Mommy, I made something for Daddy." She held up a drawing of their family as stick figures under a rainbow. At the bottom, in her careful fourth-grade handwriting, "I love you infinity +1." The church was fuller than Hannah expected. Mark's students from Roosevelt Elementary sat in the front rows with their parents. His colleagues from the Veterans Center formed a quiet honor guard along the sides. Miguel Santos sat between his mother and grandmother, clutching a handmade card that read, "Mr. Blake helped me be brave." Hannah's family arrived 30 minutes late. She heard them before she saw them. Rachel's voice carrying from the back of the church. "I couldn't find anything black that fit right. This will have to do." Hannah turned to see her sister walking down the center aisle in a white sundress with tiny flowers on it. White. To a funeral. Rachel slid into the pew behind Hannah like nothing was wrong, leaning forward to whisper, "Sorry we're late. Traffic was insane." The service began with Principal Morrison reading a letter from the school board. Then Mark's students took turns at the podium, sharing memories that made Hannah's heart break and mend simultaneously. "Mr. Blake taught me that being scared doesn't make you weak," reads Sarah, a fifth grader with pigtails. "He said brave people feel scared too, they just do the right thing anyway." Miguel stepped up to the microphone, his voice shaking but clear. "Mr. Blake told me that families come in all shapes. Some families are the people who hurt you, and some families are the people who help you heal. He helped me heal." Emma clung to Hannah's arm through the entire service, pressing her face against her mother's shoulder when the crying got too loud. When the pastor asked if anyone wanted to share final words, Isaiah stood up. "Mark Blake was the kind of man who remembered your birthday, helped you move, and never asked for anything in return. He saved lives as a medic, he saved hearts as a counselor, and he saved souls just by being decent. We should all be so lucky to be remembered the way he'll be remembered." After the service, people gathered in the church fellowship hall for coffee and sandwiches. Hannah stood near the memorial table, accepting condolences from people whose names she couldn't remember when she heard her father's voice behind her. "Hannah, we need to talk." Douglas Martinez looked the same as always, pressed Kaki's polo shirt, the expression of a man who believed the world owed him something. Her mother, Karen, stood beside him, nodding along like a backup singer. "We know this is hard," Karen began, "but we need to discuss practicalities. Mark had life insurance through the school district, right? Probably a decent policy for someone his age." Hannah stared at them. Around the room, people were sharing stories about Mark's kindness, and her parents were talking about money. "We raised you for 18 years, Douglas continued, lowering his voice. "Paid for your college, helped with the wedding. We're getting older, and Mom's medical bills are piling up. We're not asking for charity, we're asking for help from family." "Mark's policy should be substantial enough to help everyone," Karen added. "It's not like you need all of it. You're young, you can work, you'll figure it out. But we can't exactly start over at our age." Hannah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Are you seriously asking me for Mark's life insurance money at his funeral?" "We're not asking for all of it," Douglas said quickly. "Just our fair share. Maybe 40%, 50%, you'd still have plenty left." That's when Isaiah appeared beside them, moving with the quiet authority of someone who'd handled worse situations than family drama. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, I think you need to step back." "This is family business," Douglas bristled. "Hannah is family," Isaiah said calmly. "Emma is family. That money is for them, not for you." The conversation stopped when Emma tugged on Hannah's dress. She'd been playing with the other kids in the corner, but now she stood looking up at the adults with confused eyes. "Mommy, our grandma, and Grandpa asking for money, because Daddy died." Hannah's heart stopped. "Emma, honey, because I have money in my piggy bank. Do I have to give that to Grandma too?" The silence was deafening. Around them, conversations continued, people shared memories and comfort food, but Hannah's world had narrowed to her 9-year-old daughter, asking if she had to give up her allowance money because her father was dead. Karen's face went red. Douglas looked away. Rachel, who had been scrolling through her phone during the entire conversation, suddenly became very interested in the coffee table. Emma wasn't done. At school, when someone's parent dies, we make cards and bring casseroles. We don't ask them for money, that would be mean. Out of the mouths of babes. Hannah picked up her daughter, kissed her forehead, and looked directly at her parents. You need to leave. Now. As they gathered their things to go, Hannah heard Douglas mutter to Karen, We'll talk about this later when she's thinking more clearly. But Hannah was thinking clearly for the first time in days. She was thinking that grief had a way of showing you who people really were. And she was thinking that Mark would be proud of his daughter for knowing the difference between kindness and greed, even at 9 years old. The real family, it turned out, wasn't the one that shared her DNA. It was the one that stayed to help clean up the church kitchen and asked what she needed instead of what she could give. Sunday morning brought an unexpected text from Rachel. Family meeting today at 3 p.m., Mom and Dad's house, important financial discussion. Uncle Todd will be there. Uncle Todd. Hannah hadn't seen her father's brother in years, not since he'd helped her parents refinance their mortgage with some complicated legal maneuvering that ended up costing them more in the long run. Todd Martinez was the kind of lawyer who advertised on bus benches and took cases other attorneys wouldn't touch. Hannah almost didn't go. She was exhausted from the funeral. Emma was having nightmares, and the last thing she wanted was to sit in her childhood living room discussing financial matters, 48 hours after burying her husband. But something in Rachel's text felt threatening, like missing this meeting would have consequences. Isaiah offered to drive her. I don't like the sound of this, he said, adjusting the rearview mirror in his rental car. Your family's timing is suspect. They pulled up to the Martinez family home in Westfield, the same split-level ranch where Hannah had grown up, where she'd brought Mark for Sunday dinners when they were dating. The lawn needed mowing, the shutters needed painting, and her father's Buick had a new dent in the rear bumper. The living room felt smaller than Hannah remembered. Rachel sat on the couch in yoga pants and a Princeton sweatshirt, scrolling through her phone. Her parents occupied their usual chairs, Karen knitting, and Douglas reading the sports section. Uncle Todd sat at the dining room table with a briefcase, open papers, spread out like he was preparing for trial. Hannah, Karen stood up first. I'm so glad you came. We know this is difficult, but we need to discuss Mark's benefits while everything is fresh. Todd has been researching Mark's policy through the school district, Douglas added. The numbers are quite good, better than we expected for someone his age. Uncle Todd cleared his throat and gestured to the papers. I've prepared a preliminary distribution agreement based on what the family discussed yesterday. Hannah, I want you to know this was done with love and careful consideration of everyone's needs. Hannah sat down slowly. Isaiah remained standing by the doorway, arms crossed. Todd handed her a typed document with the letterhead, Martinez Family Law. The title read, Proposed Beneficiary Distribution Plan, and underneath in neat columns was a breakdown that made Hannah's vision blur. As you can see, Todd continued, we've allocated 45% to your parents, recognizing their role in raising you and their current financial hardships. 15% goes to Rachel, acknowledging her upcoming wedding expenses and student loan debt. The remaining 40% stays with you and Emma, which should be more than sufficient for your immediate needs. Hannah stared at the numbers. 40% of Mark's life insurance policy. 40% of the money he'd worked for paid premiums on designated specifically for his wife and daughter. You've got to be kidding me, she whispered. Now, Hannah, Karen said quickly. I know it seems complicated, but family takes care of family. Your father and I are getting older. My arthritis is getting worse and the medical bills are piling up. We can't work like we used to. And I'm getting married in 8 months. Rachel added without looking up from her phone. Do you have any idea how much weddings cost? Plus, my student loans are killing me. I'm drowning in debt. Douglas leaned forward in his recliner. We're not asking for charity, Hannah. We're asking for family support. Mark would understand. He was always generous. Show me where Mark approved this, Isaiah said from the doorway, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Todd adjusted his glasses. Well, obviously, Mark didn't specifically approve this arrangement, given the circumstances. But morally speaking, the family has certain rights, too. Morally, Hannah found her voice. You want to talk about morality? The room went quiet, except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner, the same clock that had marked time through Hannah's childhood, through homework sessions and Christmas mornings and fights about curfew. Mark worked 2 jobs to afford that policy. Hannah continued, her voice getting stronger. He stayed up nights grading papers and filling out insurance forms and budgeting every penny so Emma and I would be okay if something happened to him. And you want to take 60% of it because you think you deserve it. We raised you, Karen said, her knitting needles clicking faster. We paid for your college, your wedding. We've always been there for you. Where were you Wednesday night when I was sitting alone in my kitchen, trying to figure out how to tell my daughter her father was dead? Where were you Thursday when I was planning a funeral? You were at Rachel's engagement party, posting about the best night ever. Rachel finally looked up from her phone. That's not fair. We didn't know Mark was going to die that night. But you knew the next morning. You knew Thursday. You knew Friday. And instead of asking what I needed, you're asking what I can give you. Todd tapped his pen on the table. Hannah, I understand you're emotional, but let's look at this practically. You're 33 years old. You have a good career in graphic design. You can rebuild. Your parents are in their 60s with fixed incomes and mounting medical expenses. This is about being practical. Practical, Hannah repeated. She looked around the room at these people who shared her DNA, who had raised her and shaped her, and were now sitting in judgment of her grief, demanding payment for services rendered 20 years ago. Get out, she said quietly. Hannah, let's not be hasty, Douglas started. Get out. This time she stood up, the distribution agreement falling to the floor. All of you, get out of my house. This isn't your house, Rachel snapped. This is Mom and Dad's house, and you're making a huge mistake. The mistake was coming here in the first place. Todd began gathering his papers. Hannah, I understand you're upset, but this isn't going away. There are legal precedents for family claims on life insurance benefits. You might want to reconsider. Isaiah stepped away from the wall. Are you threatening her? I'm advising her, Todd said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Then, here's some advice, Isaiah replied. Touch that money and I'll make sure every legal ethics board in the state knows you tried to manipulate a grieving widow into signing away her dead husband's benefits. As they filed toward the door, Rachel turned back one last time. Fine, Hannah. Enjoy being rich and lonely. Don't come crying to us when Emma grows up and realizes her mother chose money over family. The front door slammed, leaving Hannah and Isaiah alone in the living room that suddenly felt like a museum of her former life. Family photos on the mantle, school awards on the walls, evidence of a childhood that now felt like it belonged to someone else. That night, after Isaiah had gone back to his hotel and Emma was asleep, Hannah sat at Mark's desk going through his papers. Insurance documents, school records, tax returns, the careful organization of a man who tried to prepare for every possibility. That's when she found the sealed envelope tucked behind his diploma, her name written across the front in Mark's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 6 months earlier. My dearest Hannah, it began. If you're reading this, it means something has happened to me, and I'm so sorry I can't be there to protect you from what comes next. I need to tell you about the conversation I had with your father last spring. Hannah's hands shook as she continued reading. He asked me for $100,000, said it was a loan for your mother's medical bills, but when I asked for details, the story kept changing. First, it was arthritis treatments, then it was credit card debt, then it was Rachel's student loans. I said no, and he got angry. He said family was supposed to help family, and that I was forgetting who paid for our wedding. The letter continued for 2 pages, detailing other subtle requests and manipulations Hannah had never known about. Mark had been shielding her from her family's financial expectations for years. I'm telling you this now because I love you too much to let them take advantage of your grief. The life insurance is for you and Emma. Only you and Emma. Don't let them convince you otherwise. You don't owe them anything. You never did. Hannah folded the letter carefully and sat in the dark, finally understanding that Mark had seen this coming. He'd known her family would circle like vultures, and he'd tried to protect her even from beyond the grave. The war was just beginning, but at least now she knew she had been right to fight it. The rest of Mark's letter was a masterclass in loving protection. He'd spent months quietly building legal walls around his family's future, anticipating exactly what Hannah was now facing. I've established an irrevocable trust for Emma's education and future needs. The letter continued. The principal can't be touched until she turns 25, and even then only for approved expenses like education, medical care, or purchasing a home. I've also included provisions that specifically exclude any claims from extended family members. Mark had named Thomas Brennan as the trust's executor, a estate attorney he'd met through the Veterans Center. Thomas helped me structure everything to be bulletproof. Your parents can hire every bus bench lawyer in the state, but they'll never touch Emma's money. Hannah read the letter 3 times before calling Thomas's office Monday morning. His secretary scheduled an emergency appointment for that afternoon. Thomas Brennan's office was everything Uncle Todd's wasn't: mahogany bookshelves, diplomas from Harvard Law, and the quiet confidence that came from actually knowing what he was doing. He was maybe 50 with silver hair, and the kind of handshake that made you trust him immediately. Mark was very thorough, Thomas said, spreading documents across his conference table. He came to me 8 months ago, said he wanted to bulletproof his family's financial future. He never mentioned why, but now I understand. The paperwork was extensive. Mark had structured the life insurance payout in 3 parts: 1/3 for immediate expenses, and Hannah's financial security, 1/3 into Emma's educational trust, and 1/3 into a secondary trust that would provide Hannah with income until Emma graduated college. The brilliant part, Thomas explained, is that none of this goes through probate. Your parents can't contest it because they were never beneficiaries to begin with. Mark made sure of that. What about Uncle Todd's threats? He mentioned legal precedents for family claims. Thomas actually laughed. Your uncle is either lying or incompetent, possibly both. In Illinois, life insurance proceeds go directly to named beneficiaries. Period. There's no law that requires you to share with anyone, regardless of their relationship to you or their financial situation. Hannah felt something she hadn't experienced in days: relief. Mark had seen this coming and protected them. That evening, while Hannah was making dinner, she overheard Emma on the phone with Karen. Her daughter was in the living room, speaking quietly, but Hannah could hear every word. I know you're sad about money, Grandma, but Mommy says Daddy left the money for us because he loved us very much. Hannah crept closer to listen. No, Grandma. I don't think Mommy is being mean. She's just sad because Daddy died, and sad people need hugs, not requests. There was a pause, then Emma's voice got firmer. Grandma, that's not nice. Mommy didn't steal anything. Daddy gave it to us because we're his family. Hannah heard her mother's voice through the phone, though she couldn't make out the words. Whatever Karen was saying made Emma upset. I have to go now, Grandma. I need to help Mommy with dinner. Emma hung up and found Hannah in the kitchen doorway. Mommy, why does Grandma keep asking about Daddy's money? It makes my tummy hurt. That night, after Emma went to bed, she appeared in the kitchen with a piece of construction paper and her box of crayons. She worked quietly for an hour, tongue poking out in concentration, the way she did when she was really focused. I made something, she announced, sliding the paper across the table. It was titled Emma's Emotional Invoice in careful 4th grade handwriting. Underneath, she'd drawn a list. Bedtime stories, 100 each, x 365 days, x 9 years, 328 out of 500. Hugs when scared, $50 each, x lots of times, 50,000. Teaching me to ride a bike, 500. Coming to every soccer game, 100 each, x 20 games, you're 2,000. Making pancakes shaped like animals, 25 each, x many Sundays, 2,000. Reading to me when I was sick, 200 each, x many times, 10,000. At the bottom, in red crayon, total love owed to Emma, 393 Sarn. Grandma and Grandpa paid zeros, Daddy paid everything. Hannah stared at her daughter's creation, this 9-year-old's mathematical proof of love and neglect. Emma, this is incredible. What made you think of this? Ms. Chen taught us about invoices in math class. She said they're bills for work someone did. I thought about all the work Daddy did to love me and all the work Grandma and Grandpa didn't do. Emma climbed into Hannah's lap. Daddy always said families show love by showing up. Grandma and Grandpa never showed up. Not for my school plays, not for my soccer games, not even when Daddy died until they wanted something. Out of the mouths of babes. Again, the next morning, Isaiah called from his hotel. I've been thinking about your situation all night. I'm extending my stay. Isaiah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Mark was my cousin, but he was also my best friend. He asked me to be Emma's godfather for a reason. I'm not leaving until this is settled. They met for coffee at the diner downtown, the kind of place where the waitresses called you hon, and the coffee came with free refills and judgment. Your family is going to escalate, Isaiah said, stirring sugar into his cup. People like that don't back down when they smell money. They'll try guilt, then threats, then probably some kind of legal action, even though they don't have a case. Thomas says they can't touch the money. They can't win, but they can make your life miserable trying. They'll drag this out, make it expensive, make it public. That's their strategy. Wear you down until giving them something seems easier than fighting. Isaiah leaned forward. But here's what they don't know. I'm a paramedic, which means I see families in crisis every day. I know the difference between people who deserve help and people who demand it, and I've got vacation time saved up in a healthy respect for a good fight. What are you saying? I'm saying let them try. I'll back you in court, in the press, in hell if that's where this goes. Mark protected you with paperwork, but I'll protect you with everything else. Hannah felt tears starting, but they weren't sad tears this time. For the first time since Mark died, she felt like she had backup. There's something else, Isaiah continued. I've been doing some research on your Uncle Todd. 3 complaints filed with the state bar in the last 5 years. 2 for unethical billing practices. 1 for misrepresenting a client's case. He's not exactly practicing at the top of his field. They spent the rest of the morning strategizing. Isaiah would stay in town for another week, helping Hannah document every interaction with her family. They'd change the locks on the house, forward her mail to a P.O. box, and make sure Emma's school knew not to release any information to her grandparents. This feels like war, Hannah said as they walked back to their cars. It is war, Isaiah replied. But you didn't start it. You're just going to finish it. That afternoon, Hannah posted on her social media for the first time since Mark's death. Not about grief or loss, but about protection and boundaries. She shared a photo of Emma's emotional invoice with the caption, "My 9-year-old understands something some adults don't love isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in presence." The response was overwhelming. Friends, neighbors, Mark's colleagues all commenting with support, and their own stories of family members who'd shown their true colors during times of loss. But the comment that meant the most came from Miguel Santos's mother. Mr. Blake always said family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your burdens, praying for you and Emma. Hannah screenshotted that comment and sent it to Isaiah with a message, "Mark's still teaching us even now. If you've ever had to protect what someone you loved left behind, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your promise to someone who's gone, then you understand what Hannah was learning. Sometimes, the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who'll hurt you the deepest when they think there's something in it for them." The text came on Thursday morning from Rachel. "Family gathering Sunday at 2 p.m. Everyone wants to clear the air. Please come. For Emma's sake. For Emma's sake." Hannah almost laughed at the manipulation. When had any of them ever done anything for Emma's sake before Isaiah was less amused? "This smells like an ambush. They're bringing reinforcements." He was right. When Hannah and Emma arrived at her parents' house Sunday afternoon, the driveway was packed with cars she recognized from childhood family reunions. Uncle Mike's pickup truck, Cousin Jennifer's SUV, Aunt Janice's ancient Honda with the faded bumper stickers. They'd assembled the entire extended family. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a trial. The living room had been rearranged like a courtroom. Hannah's parents sat in their usual chairs like judges. The couch and extra chairs formed a semicircle facing them filled with aunts, uncles, and cousins Hannah saw maybe twice a year. Uncle Todd sat at the dining room table again, legal pad ready, looking like he was about to present his closing arguments. Emma held Hannah's hand tighter as they walked in. At 9 years old, she understood the tension, even if she didn't understand the details. "Hannah, sweetie," Aunt Janice stood up first. She was Karen's older sister, the one who'd never married and made that everyone else's problem. "We're all here because we love you, and we're worried about you." "Worried about me?" "Your grief is clouding your judgment," Uncle Mike chimed in. He was Douglas's brother, the one who'd declared bankruptcy twice, but still had opinions about everyone else's money. "You're not thinking clearly about what Mark would have wanted." Cousin Jennifer nodded along. She was Rachel's age, recently divorced, living in her parents' basement with 2 kids. "Mark was always so generous. He would have wanted to help everyone, not just you and Emma." "You're right." Hannah looked around the room at these people, most of whom hadn't spoken to Mark more than a handful of times in the 8 years she'd known him. Now, they were experts on what he would have wanted. "We've all talked," Douglas began, "and we think you need an intervention. Not about drugs or alcohol, but about your selfishness." "My selfishness? You're hoarding money that could help the whole family," Karen added. "That's not the Hannah we raised." Uncle Todd cleared his throat. "I've prepared a revised distribution plan based on the family's input. It's more equitable than our previous proposal." He slid a new document across the coffee table. This time, Hannah's share had been reduced to 30%. The extended family had divvied up the rest, 10% here, 5% there, like they were carving up a Thanksgiving turkey. "You want to give my daughter's college fund to people who don't even remember her birthday?" Hannah's voice was deadly quiet. "College is expensive," Cousin Jennifer said. "But so are other things. My kids need braces. Uncle Mike's truck needs a new transmission. We all have expenses. And Aunt Janice's medical bills are piling up," Karen added. "She can't afford her medications on Social Security alone." Hannah stared at them. "So you want me to pay for Jennifer's kids' braces with my dead husband's life insurance money?" "It's family money now," Uncle Mike said. "Mark married into this family. His money is family money." That's when Emma let go of Hannah's hand and stepped forward. At 9 years old, she was the smallest person in the room, but suddenly she commanded everyone's attention. "I made something for everyone," she said, her voice clear and strong. She pulled out her tablet, the one Mark had given her for Christmas, and pressed play on a video she'd recorded. Emma's face appeared on the screen, sitting in her bedroom with her stuffed animals arranged behind her. "Hi, everyone. I'm Emma, and I want to talk about love and money. My daddy taught me that love isn't paid in dollars. It's shown in dinners and hugs and showing up." The room went completely silent. Emma's recorded voice continued. "I've been thinking about all the times Grandma and Grandpa came to my soccer games. That's 0 times. All the times they came to my school plays. That's 0 times. All the times they called to ask how I was doing. That's 0 times." On the screen, Emma held up her colorful, emotional invoice. "But I remember every bedtime story Daddy read to me. Every time he drove me to soccer practice. Every time he made me feel better when I was sad. That's love. That's real love." The video, Emma continued. "Now Daddy is gone, and suddenly everyone cares about me and Mommy. But they don't care about us. They care about Daddy's money. And that makes me really sad because Daddy always said families are supposed to take care of each other, not take from each other." The tablet screen went black. Real Emma looked around the room at all the adults staring at her. "I printed copies for everyone," she said, reaching into her backpack and pulling out a stack of papers. Her emotional invoice, but this time she'd made a different version for each family member. She handed one to Aunt Janice. "This one is for you. It shows all the times you remembered my birthday. 0. All the times you sent me a card or called to see how I was doing. 0. All the times you offered to help when Daddy died. 0. She moved to Uncle Mike. "This one is yours. All the times you included me in family activities. 0. All the times you asked Mommy if she needed help. 0. All the times you visited us just because. 0. One by one, Emma handed out her invoices. Each one was personalized, each one a stark accounting of neglect and absence. The room filled with an uncomfortable silence as grown adults read a 9-year-old's mathematical proof of their indifference. Cousin Jennifer was the first to start crying. She looked at her invoice at the zeros next to times. Jennifer asked about Emma's school, and times Jennifer invited Emma to play with her kids. Aunt Janice's hands were shaking as she read her copy. At the bottom, Emma had written in careful cursive, "Total love owed to Emma Infinity. Total love paid 0. Maybe you should worry about that debt instead of Daddy's money." The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, Aunt Janice spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "You should be ashamed of yourselves." Everyone turned to look at her, expecting her to direct the comment at Hannah. Instead, she was looking around the room at her own family. "This child just showed us exactly who we are, and it's not pretty. When was the last time any of us called to check on Hannah? When was the last time we offered to babysit Emma or bring them dinner or just asked if they needed anything?" She folded her invoice carefully and stood up. "I'm ashamed of myself, and I'm ashamed of all of you. This little girl just lost her father, and instead of surrounding her with love, we're here demanding money we have no right to." "Janice, sit down," Douglas said. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest, something the rest of you seem to have forgotten how to do." That's when Rachel exploded. She'd been quiet through Emma's presentation, face getting redder, and now she couldn't contain herself anymore. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, jumping up from the couch. "You're all falling for a 9-year-old's manipulation. Hannah coached her to do this. She's turning a child into a weapon against her own family." Emma stepped closer to Hannah, suddenly looking every bit of her 9 years. "Hannah, you are a manipulative martyr," Rachel continued, her voice rising. "You're using your dead husband and your traumatized daughter to make us all look like monsters. Well, congratulations, it's working." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "But don't think this is over. That money should be helping everyone, not just making you feel superior to the rest of us. Mark would be disgusted by what you've become." The front door slammed so hard it rattled the windows. In the silence that followed, Emma looked up at Hannah with tears in her eyes. "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" Hannah knelt down and pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "No, baby, you did something brave. You told the truth, and sometimes the truth makes people angry because they don't want to hear it." Looking around the room at her extended family, some crying, some ashamed, some still stubbornly defiant, Hannah realized something important. This intervention had backfired spectacularly. Instead of guilting her into sharing Mark's money, they'd revealed exactly why he'd been right to protect it. And Emma, brilliant, brave Emma, had shown them all exactly what love looked like. And what it didn't. The fallout from Sunday's family meeting was swift and ugly. By Tuesday morning, Hannah's phone was buzzing with angry texts from cousins she barely knew, accusing her of brainwashing Emma and destroying the family. But the text that made her blood run cold came from her mother at 8:47 a.m. "If you won't listen to family, maybe the school can talk sense into you." An hour later, Principal Morrison called. "Mrs. Blake, I wanted to give you a heads up. Your parents contacted our office this morning, claiming they were concerned about Emma's emotional state. They're requesting a meeting to discuss her welfare." Hannah's grip tightened on the phone. "What did you tell them?" "I told them that only parents or legal guardians can request meetings about a student's welfare, and that they'd need to go through you. But Mrs. Blake, they seemed quite insistent. They mentioned something about Emma being exposed to inappropriate financial stress." After Mark died, Hannah had updated Emma's school records to specify that only she and Isaiah could pick up Emma or make decisions about her care. Now she was grateful for Mark's paranoid attention to detail. Principal Morrison, I need to be very clear about something. My parents are not to have any contact with Emma at school. Not to pick her up, not to visit, not even to attend school events unless I'm present. I understand. We'll make sure our staff is aware. That afternoon, Hannah sat in Thomas Brennan's office again, this time filing for a restraining order. I never thought it would come to this, she told him, signing papers that would legally prohibit her parents from contacting Emma directly. Family law is the worst kind of law, Thomas said gently, because it's never really about the law. It's about people who are supposed to love you treating you like an enemy. The restraining order was granted within 48 hours. Hannah's parents would have to stay at least 500 feet away from Emma's school, and any communication about Emma had to go through Hannah directly. Meanwhile, Rachel was discovering that public meltdowns in the age of social media have consequences. Someone at the family gathering had recorded her outburst about Hannah being a manipulative martyr and posted it to Facebook with the caption, "Woman demands dead brother-in-law's life insurance money, calls grieving widow manipulative." The video went viral in their small town. By Thursday, Rachel had lost 2 of her fitness influencer sponsorships. Her carefully curated Instagram image of being a positive lifestyle guru was crashing against the reality of her demanding money from a widow and orphan. She called Hannah Friday night crying, "You have to make them take down that video. It's ruining my life." "I didn't post it, Rachel. Someone else did." "But you could ask them to remove it. People will listen to you." Hannah stared at her phone. Even now, even after everything, Rachel couldn't apologize. She could only demand that Hannah clean up the mess she'd made. "Rachel, I can't control what other people post online. Maybe you should have thought about that before you called me a manipulative martyr in front of 15 people. The line went quiet. Then, "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed this family." "I didn't destroy anything, Rachel. I just stopped pretending it was something it wasn't. But not everything that week was painful." Emma's art teacher, Mrs. Chen, called Wednesday with unexpected news. Emma entered a piece in the district art contest, and it won first place in the elementary division. The theme was important moments, and her entry is quite powerful. The drawing was titled, "The Day My Family Showed Me Who They Were." Emma had drawn herself standing in the middle of a room full of adults. But instead of faces, the adults had $signs where their eyes should be. Only one figure in the drawing had a real face, Isaiah, standing behind Emma with his hand on her shoulder. At the bottom, Emma had written, "Sometimes the people who love you the most aren't the ones who share your blood. They're the ones who share your burdens." The district displayed the winning artwork at the school board meeting, and when Hannah saw it hanging in the hallway, she cried. Not from sadness this time, but from pride. Her daughter was learning to see clearly, to name truth, to protect herself with art and words instead of silence and people-pleasing. Emma's artistic recognition sparked an idea. Hannah had been wondering what to do with Mark's memory, how to honor him in a way that would have made him proud. The answer came to her while watching Emma explain her drawing to other students. Mark had always believed in helping kids who needed advocates. Hannah started researching. She discovered that children of military families often struggled with unique challenges: frequent moves, deployed parents' trauma from war zones. Mark would have wanted to help kids like Miguel, kids who needed someone to believe in them. 3 weeks after the family meeting, Hannah announced the creation of the Blake Wellness Fund. Using a portion of Mark's life insurance money, she established a foundation providing counseling services, educational support, and emergency assistance to military children in crisis. The first recipient was Miguel Santos. His mother was struggling to pay for the therapy he needed after his father's deportation. The Blake Wellness Fund covered 6 months of sessions with a bilingual counselor who specialized in family separation trauma. "Mr. Blake would be so proud," Miguel's mother told Hannah at the check presentation. "He always said that helping one child helps the whole future." Isaiah, who had been planning to return to Denver after the first week, kept extending his stay. First, it was to help with the restraining order paperwork. Then, it was to help Emma with her art contest entry. Then, it was to help launch the foundation. Finally, one evening over pizza at Hannah's kitchen table, Emma looked up from her homework and asked, "Uncle Isaiah, why don't you just move here?" Isaiah glanced at Hannah, then back at Emma. "Would you like that?" "Yes, because families are the people who show up, and you keep showing up." That weekend, Isaiah flew back to Denver to pack his apartment and transfer his paramedic certification to Illinois. He'd found a job with the Springfield Fire Department and a small apartment 15 minutes from Hannah and Emma. "I'm not trying to replace Mark," he told Hannah as they loaded boxes from his rental truck. "I could never do that, but Emma needs a man in her life who shows up consistently, and you need backup. Mark asked me to be her godfather for a reason." Emma helped carry Isaiah's books into his new apartment, chattering about all the things they could do now that he lived close by. Soccer practice, art projects, bedtime stories when Hannah had to work late. Watching them together, Hannah realized something profound. Mark's death had taken away Emma's father, but it had revealed something else. Family wasn't about blood or obligation or shared last names. Family was about choice, about showing up, about staying. Isaiah chose them. Miguel's mother chose gratitude over grievance. Mark's students chose love over loss. Even Principal Morrison and Mrs. Chen chose protection over politeness when Hannah and Emma needed advocates. Meanwhile, Hannah's biological family chose demands over comfort, money over memory, and entitlement over empathy. The difference was stark, and it was clarifying. For the first time since Mark died, Hannah could see the future taking shape. It didn't look like the future she'd planned with Mark, but it looked like something worth building, a life surrounded by people who chose to love them, not people who expected to be paid for it. Emma was learning the same lesson, but with the clarity that only children possess. At 9 years old, she already understood that the strongest bonds aren't created by genetics or guilt, but by grace and genuine care. And somewhere, Hannah was certain Mark was watching his daughter figure out one of life's most important lessons: that you can't control who claims to love you, but you can absolutely control who you choose to love back. 6 months later, Hannah found an envelope in her mailbox with her mother's careful handwriting. No return address, just Hannah Blake, written in the script she remembered from childhood birthday cards and grocery lists. Inside was a 2-page letter on Karen's good stationery, the kind she saved for thank you notes and sympathy cards. The words were different from any Hannah had ever received from her mother. "Dear Hannah," it began. "I've spent 6 months trying to write this letter, and I keep starting over because everything I want to say sounds like an excuse, and you deserve better than excuses." Hannah sat at her kitchen table, coffee growing cold as she read her mother's confession. "Your father and I were wrong. Not just wrong about the money, but wrong about everything. We were so focused on our own financial fears that we forgot the most important thing: you had just lost the love of your life, and Emma had lost her father. Instead of bringing you comfort, we brought you more pain." The letter continued with an honesty that was painful to read. "I keep thinking about Emma's drawing, about those zeros next to all the ways we failed to show up for her. She was right. We were so absent from your lives that we had no right to expect anything when Mark died. We took your strength for granted and mistook your independence for not needing love." Karen admitted things Hannah had never expected to hear acknowledged. "We were jealous of Mark, if I'm being completely honest. He was everything. Your father and I weren't patient, present, generous, without expecting anything in return. When he died, instead of helping you grieve, we saw an opportunity to benefit from the life he'd built with you. That's unforgivable." The letter's final paragraph was the hardest to read. "I know we don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I'm asking for something much smaller: 15 minutes with Emma on her birthday next month. Not at our house, not with demands or expectations. Just 15 minutes to tell her we're sorry, and that we love her, even though we haven't shown it well." Hannah read the letter 3 times before showing it to Isaiah, who had become her sounding board for all major decisions. "What do you think?" she asked. Isaiah considered carefully. "It sounds genuine. No mentions of money, no conditions, no veiled manipulations. But you know your parents better than I do. Is this who they really are, or who they're trying to be?" Emma was turning 10 in 2 weeks, double digits as she kept reminding everyone. She'd asked for a simple party at the park with her friends from school, the kids from her art class, and the new friends she'd made through Isaiah's fire station family. "What does Emma want?" Isaiah asked. That night, Hannah sat on Emma's bed during their usual bedtime conversation. "Grandma and Grandpa wrote me a letter," she began carefully. "They want to see you for a few minutes on your birthday, to apologize and tell you they love you." Emma was quiet for a long moment, considering. At 10, she was wise beyond her years, shaped by loss and disappointment, but not hardened by them. "Do they want money?" she asked finally. "No, they just want to say they're sorry." "And you'll be there the whole time?" "The whole time, and Uncle Isaiah too if you want." Emma nodded slowly. "Okay, but I have something to give them too." On Emma's birthday, they met at Riverside Park, the same place where Mark used to take Emma to feed the ducks. Hannah chose it deliberately, public, neutral, full of good memories that belonged to Mark and Emma alone. Karen and Douglas looked older, smaller somehow. Karen had lost weight, and Douglas's hair had gone completely gray. They approached carefully, like people walking on ice they weren't sure would hold. "Happy birthday, Emma," Karen said softly, holding a small wrapped gift. "We brought you something." Emma accepted the present politely. Inside was a simple charm bracelet with a single charm, a small silver heart engraved with "Love Grandma and Grandpa." "Thank you," Emma said. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I have something for you, too." It was her emotional invoice drawing, but this one was different. At the top, she'd written, "New invoice," and underneath, "Starting over at 0." "I've been thinking about what Uncle Isaiah taught me about forgiveness," Emma said, her voice clear and steady. "He said forgiveness doesn't mean pretending someone didn't hurt you. It means choosing not to let the hurt control you." She handed the paper to her grandmother. "I forgive you for not being there before, but I remember that you weren't there. If you want to be part of my life now, you have to show up. Not just with words, but with actions." Karen's eyes filled with tears as she read Emma's new invoice. This time, instead of zeros, Emma had written, "Starting fresh," next to entries like, "Times Grandma calls just to check on me," and "Times Grandpa remembers what I like." "I forgive," Emma said simply. "But I remember." Douglas knelt down to Emma's eye level. "We understand, sweetheart, and we're going to do better. Not because we want anything, but because we love you and we want to earn the right to be in your life." They talked for exactly 15 minutes, just as requested. Karen asked about Emma's art. Douglas asked about school, and both of them listened without offering advice or making demands. When the time was up, they hugged Emma gently and thanked Hannah for the opportunity. "This is a start," Karen said to Hannah as they prepared to leave. "I know we have a lot of work to do to earn your trust back, but if you'll let us, we'd like to try." After they left, Hannah and Emma spread a blanket on the hill overlooking the duck pond, Mark's favorite spot in the park. Isaiah had packed them a birthday picnic, Emma's favorite sandwiches, strawberries, and chocolate chip cookies. "How do you feel about seeing Grandma and Grandpa?" Hannah asked as they watched the ducks paddle across the water. Emma considered the question while unwrapping a cookie. "It felt sad and hopeful at the same time. Sad because I know Dad would have wanted them to love us better. Hopeful because maybe they learned something." She took a bite of cookie and swung her legs from their perch on the picnic table. "Mom, do you think Dad would be proud of how we stood up for ourselves?" Hannah looked out at the pond, at the place where Mark used to bring Emma to teach her about patience and kindness and watching for small wonders. She could almost see him there, pointing out a family of ducklings making up stories about their adventures. I think Dad would say we protected the right legacy, Hannah said finally. Not the money, not the stuff, but the important thing, the love. Emma nodded thoughtfully. The love we give and the love we choose to accept. Exactly. As the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Hannah felt something she hadn't experienced since Mark died: peace. Not the absence of sadness, but the presence of hope. Not the end of grief, but the beginning of healing. They had learned to build boundaries without building walls to forgive, without forgetting to choose love, without accepting manipulation. Emma was growing up strong and wise, surrounded by people who chose to show up for her consistently. And somewhere, Hannah was certain Mark was smiling. The story ends not with revenge or riches, but with something more valuable: the knowledge that family is not who's related to you, but who's dedicated to you. That love is not what people say, but what people do. And that sometimes the greatest inheritance you can leave a child is not money in the bank, but the wisdom to know the difference between people who claim to love them and people who actually do. Family is not who's related, it's who shows up. Like, comment and subscribe, and remember to protect your peace. You don't need anyone's permission to choose love over obligation boundaries, over guilt, and the people who see your worth over the people who only see what you're worth to them. Family isn't who's related to you. It's who shows up when your world falls apart. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about people who chose courage over comfort. What would you have done in Hannah's situation? Let me know in the comments below.